I'm here with my friend Jeremy Cross, who's the International Networks Director for the Princess Foundation, where I used to work. And Jeremy, it's great to see you and compare notes. Tell us a little about what you're doing right now.
At the foundation for the last 2 years, we've been working on an initiative to plan for rapid urbanisation.
Such an important issue.
Yeah, and which fits so directly with the issues that have been under discussion here, implementing the new urban agenda and delivering the SDGs. We've, as we've discussed before, for a long time seen the need for a toolkit that can support particularly secondary cities and areas where there's very limited capacity to plan and to prepare for the urbanisation that's happening very rapidly in so many of those cities, smaller cities, and particularly across the Commonwealth, which has been our focus. This all grew initially out of a roundtable following a Commonwealth Local Government Forum meeting in London, where they met at Clarence House, and in discussion with the Prince of Wales, this idea for additional resource to support small cities came about. So following that, we've been working with the Commonwealth Local Government Forum, with Commonwealth Association of Planners, a critical organisation, and as well more recently with the Commonwealth Association of Architects, particularly to build and connect between disciplines so that we're not, which is often a problem, isn't it, focusing purely on planners, but actually thinking of the many others, architects, engineers, surveyors, who might have planning in their job title but not have any real experience of how to deliver that in a professional manner.
So that's part of the challenge, isn't it, to join up the people, get them out of their silos and learn to work together?
Exactly, which of course has long been a key methodology within the Prince's Foundation, the inquiry by design, bringing people together to understand what different people's perspectives are, and then to build a plan with a consensus and an understanding across all of those different groups.
And the other key challenge, it seems to me, is to plan rapidly for rapid urbanization, as I think our friend Ben Bulgar put it. That we really have to move quickly and in a very sort of lean way, and that's really the idea behind the toolkit, right?
Absolutely, that it's happening right now as we speak, and the statistic just given during that closing session at the World Urban Forum was 1 million a week, who are, in terms of the urban population, increasing by 1 million a week, which is a staggering amount, isn't it? And most of that is taking place in less developed countries, less able to plan with less resource. So yeah, what we've been trying to do with partners is to identify ways that we can support that to happen rapidly, even if it's just a basic framework, a bare bones planning, which can then be developed and augmented later as resources allow.
And I heard a statistic that something like the number of people living in cities will double in the next 40 years, and the area will more than double, quite a bit larger than double, which means it will sprawl.
Yeah, absolutely, which is a frightening prospect, isn't it? When you think that that's happening actually at the same time, not because there's provision for good public open space or green space within the cities, but just because of very, very low density and sprawl and no real planning to create compact cities and the kind of densities that we need to achieve and look to if we're going to create the mixed income, mixed use and walkable neighbourhoods, which I know we believe so strongly in.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that we're very interested in at the Center for the Future of Places is the importance of public space, and that means streets too, walkable streets, and opportunities for people to do things other than ride in cars when they need to go somewhere, like take transit and bicycles and so on. And I know that's preaching to the choir for the Princess Foundation.
Absolutely, but yeah, I think the public open space, whether it's streets, green corridors, blue corridors, green spaces, they're all so critical, aren't they? And they all form a place where community interact and come together and actually build those cohesive neighbourhoods, and the sustainability which is so important. And that's another element of the toolkit, which is really was boiling things down. If we're talking about the bare bones, then it is really those essential public spaces roads that can perhaps provide, would in the future provide capacity for public transport systems, for commerce and community uses to develop around them, as well as preserving green corridors, identifying sufficient green space within a city, blue corridors and so on.
And the toolkit is now being developed and will be ready in the next couple of months, is that right?
Well, that's, we hope very much. I think we're at a point now, we've actually just recently pulled this together, which is really a mock-up, a starting point.
Right.
Using the consolidated methodologies which we've brought together from the various partners who've engaged with it at this point, to create a 6-step process, starting with a visioning process and moving right through to the end, where you would have a planned neighbourhood, and within that you would have identified and reserved those corridors as for transportation, for roads, for green and blue. And in terms of timescale, we are at the point where we've got a basic format and methodology that's clear, and our next step is to test that with partners in different parts of the Commonwealth, reflecting the diversity of the Commonwealth. So we hope very much to have a partner here in Malaysia with the Malaysian Institute of Planners, who are very enthusiastic about the lead that they can give in developing the resources. We also have partners in Sierra Leone, where historically the Prince's Foundation has done quite a lot of work, and where we have already tested to some degree the methodologies in the toolkit as it stands, and we're also looking hopefully to find a small island developing state either in the Pacific or the Caribbean, where we would also test it. Not that they're facing necessarily the same levels of rapid urbanisation, but clearly with climate change and rising sea levels they have different issues and resilience to develop and deliver.
So one of the things that you and I have been talking about is the potential role of another one of the Prince's charities called INTBOW, and I'm involved also with INTBOW, which is a long, complicated name, International Network for Traditional Building, Architecture and Urbanism. And we have a small island developing states chapter. And I was just talking to Zahir Alam, who is the head of that chapter, and I think that would be a great conversation to have to see if maybe we could work with him. He's based in Mauritius, but he has other contacts throughout the network. And it seems to me, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, we've been talking about this a little bit before, and I want to continue the conversation about how INTBOW in particular as a network of chapters around the world, 32 I think now, can be helpful in this rapid urbanization toolkit process.
Absolutely, yes. INTBOW has always obviously been a key partner for the Prince's Foundation, and it does reflect and engage internationally with people committed to the same issues of sustainability in urban development and the environment, and also reflecting very strongly that reference to tradition and all that we can learn from tradition in the way that we build in the future. And certainly INTBOW, we would welcome a deeper engagement with INTBOW in relation to the development of the toolkit. And the idea of specifically being able to connect with the small island developing states, I think is a great one, because they again lack often the support structures. I know that you will have the Malaysian Institute of Planners or the Kenyan Institute, but with small countries like that, I would imagine feels very, very lonely for the one planner who has the responsibility for planning in the Solomon Islands or wherever, and yet their needs are just as great and are often ignored. So that would be a wonderful development to take forward.
In fact, Zahir was talking just the other day about exactly that, the problems they have with being isolated from one another, vast distances across the ocean and so on, and yet they need to find ways to collaborate. It does seem to me that this need to collaborate, to join up, is such a key dimension of the challenges that we face. And I wonder what your thoughts are about the role of academic institutions like ours. I know you're working with NYU, right?
We are, yes. New York University, the Marin Institute of Urban Management have also been very supportive, and we again have identified that some of their methodologies and the way that we would see this developing are very directly aligned, recognising specifically that the response needs to be rapid. And an awful lot of what we try to do up front can perhaps come later if we are to preserve the kind of the essential framework. So New York University, we've certainly been working with them in this, and they've provided a lot of support in terms of research and data analysis, which they will continue to do, and also reference to their two programs that they've worked with in Ethiopia and Colombia. But the other element we've always thought for the toolkit is that it, apart from being a practical tool, it could also very neatly become an educational module, a module within planning school, within a school of architecture, again, to engage people in thinking about the issues that they face and simple but effective ways to respond to them.
Well, that's something we've certainly been thinking about as well. How do you, first of all, create tools of that kind? How do you apply the research and the academic components to the process to benefit, and then harvest those benefits to share with others? How do you use that as a public education function and a professional education function? And it seems to me one of the big challenges that we're facing right now is changing the sort of Titanic, if you will, that's heading towards the same old business as usual models, as the Prince said very eloquently in his introductory speech to the World Urban Forum, that business as usual isn't going to be enough. And yet we have to really change the way architectural education is done, for example, and education in planning and urban design, to start to face these realities and the human dimensions. I know the Prince's Foundation has been very involved in that sort of work. What are your thoughts about the challenges ahead and how we're going to meet those?
I think part of our thinking behind the toolkit is that it will be a very easy way, particularly for educational, for universities and other colleges of higher education, particularly in the developing world, who often lack the resource to develop modules that can be tested, that have been tested and that can be used effectively. So I think we anticipate that people will welcome the provision of a resource in a packaged format that can quite easily be integrated into a curriculum. I think what we'd also very much like to see, again going back to the point we've discussed about partnership, is ways in which we can identify academic institutions in the North, in Europe, in North America, in Australasia, who might be able to effectively partner with those universities in other parts of the world and support them in a continuation of development of the toolkit.
Well, we're very keen to explore that with you as well. The other thing that you and I were talking about earlier is the remarkable vision that the Prince of Wales has on these issues, and the abuse that he sometimes takes for the courageous positions he's taken on a lot of these issues of sustainability and soil and climate and social justice and so many issues. We were talking earlier, I sometimes wonder why he doesn't just say, forget it, this is not worth the effort. And yet he perseveres, and I admire that enormously. And I wonder what you think about the importance of his legacy at this moment in history, and how we, those of us who are admirers of his, people who believe that we can carry on his work in whatever form, where do we go from here?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people, in looking at the new urban agenda, wouldn't necessarily click or put it together that the Prince of Wales has been saying these things for his adult life, effectively.
Right.
And here they are, they've come together, articulated in one document. They talk about mixed use, inclusivity, walkability, and reference to tradition and to culture, and being respective of culture and local culture, green space. All of the things that as we've discussed, the Prince has felt and continues to feel passionately about, and commits himself to through the founding of the Prince's Foundation, being a founder and a patron of INTBOW, and connecting in so many ways with so many others in working in this area. I personally hope that recognition does come, because I feel it's important. I think it was really encouraging to see in the hall when the Prince's video message was delivered, that the reaction to it, that people approved and connected with the words that he was presenting, and appreciated his commitment. And I think in terms of legacy, often legacy isn't always evident and apparent until later, but certainly the number of people that must have been impacted in one way or another by educational programs, or by being a member, or connecting with the work of his charities, I hope continues that work.
Well, I remember, for example, that Prince Albert was sometimes criticized very harshly in his own day, and then later on a revered figure, and I suspect that'll be the case with the Prince of Wales as well. But the important thing is that he's made us all aware of the work that we have to do ahead that's so incredibly important, and his message has been very inspiring. I think you'll agree. So Jeremy Cross, thank you so much. It's a pleasure as always.
Thank you.